What up, guys? So today on the podcast, we're going to talk about whether or not Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and sport Jiu-Jitsu is a mutilated art. Came from a question from an email, so we're going to dive into that one today and talk about it. Guys, our sponsors, as always, are Charlotte's Web. That's one of our main ones. They became one of our sponsors after Eugene and I started using their stuff. We enjoyed it, and we're like, hey, let's get these guys as a sponsor, because again, we get asked from people all the time about, hey, can we be one of your sponsors? I remember I got asked one time recently for this, it was for what were they asking me to sell? They were asking me to promote some sort of
it was an umbrella, wasn't it?
No, I got the umbrella was a couple years ago. This one was some sort of app for your phone. It's like a game, and it was you get $5 per person that downloads. I'm like, I'm not gonna. What is wrong with you people? You looked at my content and you said we want to give this guy some block game that he's going to want to. I don't want. It's ridiculous. And I'm really big on this, guys, because again, we live in a world where integrity sometimes is at a minimum. So I don't promote anything on the podcast or anything that I have not worn, used, or enjoyed. So I want to let you guys know that anytime we talk about stuff that's in there, it's 100% Chewy approved. Chewy tested, Chewy approved is something I stand behind. So with that, Charlotte's Web is the CBD that I use personally. It's a CBD that we have partnered up with for this particular podcast. And again, I really encourage you guys that, regardless of what CBD you're using, make sure it's third-party regulated, because it can be whatever they want to put into it, and you can't always guarantee the quality of it. And one of the things about Charlotte's Web is it's a high-quality product. They third-party test it, so it's good stuff in there, and I really, really enjoy it. And it really has helped with a number of different things with me personally. So again, I encourage you guys to check it out. You can check out their website at charlottesweb.com, and you can use a promo code Jiu-Jitsu to save 15%. And then another one of our sponsors recently, and again, this guy originally sent me some stuff to try. One of the things that made me take notice to his package, because he actually sent me a mailed package. He didn't just send me a message, an email. He sent me a package, and in that package there was a little thumb drive in the shape of a Wookiee. I thought it was cute. But super cool guy. But he sent me a bunch of gear, and I tried it out, and we've been talking about it ever since. Recently we posted a picture of me getting neon bellied by Jess. With a shirt on that said Neon Belly, Neon Belly. And so again, you want to check out his stuff. He's got a lot of t-shirts and rash guards and stuff like that. So if you want to stock up on some new gear for when you get back to the gym, you can check out his website. It's epicrollbjj.com. The promo code is Jiu-Jitsu, as always. 15% is what you'll save if you use it. And then, guys, we also run a couple of other little sort of programs, I guess you'd say. We have our Patreon at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast, and I also have a membership site that I call it the Jiu-Jitsu Vault. And basically both of these, the Patreon has a bunch of extra content from the podcast. So if you like some of the guests, we do a lot of different stuff with them, and we put it in the back end there. There's also some video content of different warm-ups and stretches and just different things we want to share. And then the Vault is kind of my just monthly little thing where I can get down and dirty and just share different stuff that maybe doesn't necessarily fall into lines with what I want to do on the YouTube channel or wherever. This particular month coming up, I'm working on a series for the Vault where I'm going to break down matches and talk about the principles at work in those matches. So while you're sitting at home and you can't train necessarily, you can look at these things and you can sort of see some of the strategies and sort of concepts and principles at work, so that this way maybe they make a little bit better sense to you. I was thinking about doing this because I've been playing chess recently. And in chess, there's a lot of different tactics and maneuvers and things like that, and there's different principles that guide them. One of them, is an example, is pinning a particular piece, where you might attack one piece. Let's say, for instance, if you're attacking the king and there's a piece in front of it, that piece can no longer move. And so then it's pinned there, and then you can move around and do different stuff. And so there's different principles that sort of guide, and different strategies that guide jiu-jitsu. And so I figured it would be a fun video series to do. And so that'll be up in May. You can check that out at jujitsu.net/vault, and you can look over that. So anyway, with all that said, guys, let's jump into the podcast and talk about whether or not Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a mutilated art. What's up, guys? So recently I got an email from one of the email readers, so one of the people that gets my daily, almost daily. It's Monday through Friday emails. And they sent me a message asking about what I thought about a comment that got made about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu being mutilated, right? And it came from one of the Gracie family members. I think it was Helson. It's not Helson, but it's like Reyllson, something like that.
I don't know. That's who it was. I'm not sure. But one of the Gracie family.
Yeah, one of the Gracie families. And a lot of them have said this kind of stuff, but basically said that jiu-jitsu was a mutilated art. And I found the video. There's a guy named, he runs a website or a YouTube channel, and he was talking about it, right? It's a mutilated art. And they were just talking about, sport jiu-jitsu and the way that it's done right now is a mutilated art, and said that it's not as good and it's not as complete and is not as useful or whatever as the traditional Gracie style jiu-jitsu that was learned. And, I want to sort of preface this before we get into it that I have a deep sense of gratitude towards the Gracie family because, I mean, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here talking about jiu-jitsu. I mean, they are the reason that this stuff spread. Rorion was a masterful marketer, which I appreciate. I'm a fan of marketing, and so I appreciate his ability to get that information out there, to use, the UFC as a springboard to spread it everywhere and to show us that it was such an effective art. And so, again, I have a deep sense of gratitude towards them for it. But the thing is, when you look at martial arts are I know what they mean by martial being sort of a military thing and fighting thing, but martial arts in themselves are forms of expressions, right? The person that is doing the martial art will adapt it to them, and the situations that they use will adapt it. I mean, you look at the famous Musashi, right? He used his swords differently than other people did, right? That was his expression of the arts and the techniques and things like that he was learning. But when you look at martial arts just from our lineage, the way that Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the way that it comes to be, right? It starts back. There was originally traditional Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, right? It's spelled Jutsu. And then that eventually became Judo, right? Kano took some of the techniques, he changed the philosophy and the sort of focus of the art, right? Changed it a bit, put more focus on the act of sort of rolling and the act of, newaza and randori, right? The act of actually fighting, and took out some of the lethal techniques, and then they train the lethal techniques and the more like strikes and things like that in kata forms, but they leave the ability to where they can train really hard by taking those things out and allow you to train hard, and then they can always add them back in as needed. And then became and he made it into a big sport thing, and he used it as a way, as he said it, as he saw it as a way to train people mentally and physically through the hard training, right? So then we had judo. And the judoka, they went around the world doing challenge matches, spreading the art of judo. I mean, this is why it's everywhere, right? They went around the world spreading it, doing these challenge matches. There's famous matches with them in like the United States against these wrestlers and catch wrestlers and football players and stuff. And these judoka made their way down to Brazil and taught some Brazilians, right? The Brazilians then took that martial art that they were given, that they were taught, and they begun to modify it. They changed it, and they made it sort of different. Like there was an expression of the sort of situations that they were used to, and also the conditions of the people that were then practicing the art. Like when you look at Carlos was a pretty small guy. He was not very big, and even Kano was not a huge man, and he even talked about using strength, or using, technique over strength and things like that. But then the Brazilians took it and they began to modify it. And it's funny because, like, I would wonder if, like, Masahiko Kimura, right? Because he was the one that faced Helio Gracie in a famous match, right? I wonder if he would have thought that this Brazilian version of what they would consider judo was mutilated. Because, so, the famous story goes that Masahiko Kimura, right? He was he's one of the best judoka to ever live, right? There's a handful of guys that when you see like who were the best, he was one of them, and he's and obviously we know his last name for a particular reason, which we'll talk about in a second. But Kimura, right? In a group of Japanese judoka, they go down to Brazil, and they immediately get challenged by Helio, right? And these guys. Masahiko or one of the other guys, I can't remember his name offhand, but Helio goes against one of the judoka. The judoka throws him several times, and then he gets frustrated, and Helio chokes him out with a collar choke, right? Chokes him out unconscious. And it was done in a ring. It's kind of neat. And then Then Elio made another challenge, and Masahiko Kimura stepped up to fight Elio. Right? He said, "Okay, I'll go ahead and fight you." And when they went against each other, it was interesting because there's always different, like when you read the different sides of the story, right? Like the Gracie side has one side,
Yeah.
the Kimura and the way that he wrote about it in his journals and his book, they come at it a different way. But supposedly the way it all happened is that like this big match happens and Elio's getting ready to go up against Kimura. Like Elio's side, they bring a coffin to the ring. Supposedly, like basically, you're dead. We're gonna choke you out. You're dead, right?
Mental warfare.
Right. And it's funny because they talk. Like I remember listening to an interview or one of the videos, and they were talking about this match, and they said that like they were trying to say that like Kimura was like 100 pounds heavier or something crazy than like Elio, and I'm like, it wasn't even close. Like Elio was taller, he was a little bit lighter, so Elio was, I forgot what they had him as, but I think he was around like 80 kilograms. So he was like in the 170 range or something like that, right?
That's
and then Kimura was shorter. He was a little bit shorter than him, but he was stockier. I think he was at around 84 kilograms, somewhere in the 80s. So he was heavier, but he was stockier. But by no means was this like a mismatch of weight. Right, it wasn't like something where this guy was so much bigger than him. Right, he wasn't
Nogueira versus Bob Sapp.
Yeah, it was not Nogueira versus Bob Sapp, which is literally like a 100-pound difference. Right, so they go against each other, and during the match, it's funny because when you read, if you search them, you can find them. There was a book that Kimura had out, and where he sort of shares from his experiences, right, which I think are interesting because he doesn't put as much weight on this event as a lot of people do. He just kind of like talks. It's like just kind of part of it, right? Like in his book, he talks about all these different people. Like, oh, I rolled with these people, and back in the day, like these judokas were, when they would fight each other, they would go on like not super soft mats. So like when he would throw people and knock them out. And he would talk about it. He was like, oh, I threw him with Osotogari, and he had a modified version of Osotogari. I knocked him out, KO, right? And this is why in judo the ippon, right, knocking someone flat on their back, the reason why that's it is because that's what happens. If you get thrown on a hard surface, you're done. You're dead. You're unconscious. And this is also why if you listen to a judo player, the reason why a lot of them think that their art is more effective for fighting, because they're like, well, if you in a fight you can't crouch down like you're going to shoot in for a leg. You've got to be able to stand up straight, and then so you can grab clothes and throw them, right? So I mean, they have a case there, okay. But basically, he goes down there and fights Elio, and during this match, he throws him a couple times, and he said, man, he goes, I threw him as hard as I could, but because these darn mats are so soft, he's like, wasn't used to the softness of the mats, right? They were extra soft. He's like, these darn soft mats, I couldn't knock him out. And then, even Elio talked about the fact that when he got thrown, he said, like, oh, kind of like knocked him out, but he woke back up.
Yeah.
So then he's like, I pinned him. And in the pinning, like, they had these special Brazilian rules. Because in judo, if you get pinned for a certain amount of time, you're considered that's a loss, right? And their idea behind that is, it's like, well, if you're pinned in a hard surface on the ground and for like 20 some odd seconds, like, I mean, what are you going to do? But in Jiu-Jitsu it's a little differently, and so in the Brazilian rules that they had, you had to finish with submission. You couldn't simply just pin the person,
right?
And throwing them didn't mean the match was over. And so, so he says that he goes through it, and then he ends up putting Elio into a Kimura. I forgot the name that they have that in the traditional Japanese wording, but puts him in the arm lock, the shoulder lock, the Kimura. And he breaks his arm, and then the family ends up throwing in the towel, right? Elio did. Now the thing is, I want to say this is that, like, hats off to Elio, because he first off, he choked out a really good, strong judoka before going up against Kimura, and against Kimura, he was in there fighting with him, and he was doing his best. And even Kimura kind of like, he talks about in his journal, like, you kind of get this idea that he was kind of like frustrated a little bit, because he's like, he's like, all right, I gotta grab this guy's arm, I gotta finish him, right? So hats off to him for doing that, because you got to think, like, Kimura was coming from like where the best judo was at the time, and then he's going up against this guy who's getting this sort of intermittent teaching. Mm-hmm. And so hats off to them for doing that. But then he breaks his arm, and they taps him out. And so when you think about that, so Jiu-Jitsu, traditional Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, then became judo. judo then became its own thing and had differences and was not done the same. And then now down in Brazil, there was this new version of Brazilian judo that then would become Brazilian jiu-jitsu that then is different from those two. And again, it has different rules, different focuses, right? Like, in judo, you typically have a higher focus on the throws, right? Which back in the day, there was a lot of what they would call newaza, which is groundwork. There's a lot of newaza in judo. If you watch some of these old judoka when they would compete against each other and the rules weren't so strict on the groundwork, you'd see a lot of really cool submissions. One of my friends, Hiro, he sent me his favorite judoka from back in the day, and it was like way back in the day. And you see these matches, and he's doing a lot of really cool collar chokes and stuff that like is like what we would consider new school. It's like they were doing it like freaking 60 years ago, 70 years ago. But again, the rules are different now, so now the focus changes, and so at that point, it's different. And so I think the thing is that unlike judo, there's no one governing body of jiu-jitsu, right? In judo, they change the rules and they change the way that it's practiced and how competitions work, and everybody kind of has to fall in line with that, right? So back in the day, there was a lot of these sambo guys that would come in, and they were like using all these unorthodox grips. So judo put rules in, they stopped the grip fighting that they were doing. And then these guys were shooting in and grabbing legs and doing like double leg takedowns and stuff. There was a guy named like Pavel Nastulia. I think he was Polish, and he was doing like he would blast double leg people, and so they were like, get rid of those. And like there was a lot of Russians doing like sort of a fireman carries, like drop to their knees style, got rid of those, to basically change the rules a little bit. And so
but having the governing, so jiu-jitsu's got. We don't really have, I guess.
We don't have a government.
Like,
we don't have
an international.
We don't have a central governing body, right? So we don't have like the IJF, the International Judo Federation. Like that's a legit thing. All the countries come together and they come together with some sort of practice for the way things are going to be, right? Jiu-Jitsu, on the other hand, is deregulated. So, and this is the reason why when people ask me, do you want it to be an Olympic sport? I was like, hell no, I don't want it to be an Olympic sport, because then it becomes regulated to the point where we have to fit into a box that someone wants. I love this ability to where you go this way, you go this way. So you can have EBI matches, you can have fight to win matches, you can have the Metamora style matches that they have, you can have, IBJJF style matches. You can do this however you want to, and this allows people to be much more free when it comes to the way that they practice in the gyms, I think, and I like that about it. Again, and this is, by the way, guys, this is not a fact. This is not like the way it has to be. I'm sharing my opinions on this because, again, it's the way I think about it. So again, if you have a different opinion, that's completely fine. So
I think not having that exact governing body is kind of, I think, a reason why jiu-jitsu has gone in so many different directions. Like the creativity, the evolution, the different inverted guards and the lapel guards and all that stuff is, I think, a result of there not being put in one box to. Because I don't know, do you think judo has really evolved that much? I mean, I know they've changed some rules, but
I'm not a hardcore judoka, so
I don't know if like judo's that much different than it was, 20 years ago or whenever this.
I'm sure that they evolved, and I'm not sure as far as again, I'm not the biggest. I watch judo a little bit because I find it fun to watch, but I don't know. Like, I don't. I just know that traditional jiu-jitsu spawned judo, and then judo got morphed and then changed into jiu-jitsu,
right?
And now the cat's out of the bag, right? So the Gracies and all the Brazilians that sort of created this, because there were a couple other families that got into this, right? They spread this stuff, right? Like Fada was one of them. Like GF team, that's a Fada lineage.
Yeah,
GF lineage, right?
Okay.
And so, but this thing spread, and all of a sudden, boing, it's everywhere, right? Everybody sees it. Everybody's doing it. They're doing it all these different ways, and it's really cool. But the cat's out of the bag now.
Yeah.
And so now we've gotten to this situation where I feel like it's almost become like almost a religious thing where, some people say, well, you're doing it wrong. And like, even though it's like we're doing jiu-jitsu and we kind of are all in the same sort of umbrella and we're all connected in some way, it's like, you're doing it wrong. Why am I doing it wrong? Right? Like, well, because it's not the way that we do it, and you should be doing it the way we did it because we do it the right way. Well, what's the right way? It's like, you know what I mean? Like, and again, we're not talking about like math. We're not talking about things that like hard line things. We're talking about an expression of an art form, right? That can be used for fighting. And now I will say this. When I was listening to the video and sort of reading the article, there is a point to it that I agree with, which is, some gyms don't offer any sort of striking. They don't offer any sort of like fighting aspects.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, if you don't learn takedowns, if you don't learn how to punch or kick, or you don't learn how to block punches or any of this stuff, like, good luck. I mean, I'm not saying that you wouldn't be able to fight and do okay, because there's plenty of examples of people that just do this. I've had students of mine who, have primarily focused on sport jiu-jitsu, and they get into an altercation and they're completely fine. But our gym also has avenues for you to test yourself. We have striking, we have MMA classes, and periodically I'll do a fighting jiu-jitsu section of the themes that we'll use for a couple of weeks, and we'll get into it. Hey, we're gonna use punches and things like that, because I think you have to understand what that's like. And I would say this too: if you are doing this for self-defense and if you've never been hit hard enough that it like startled you, I'm not saying you got to take brain damage, right? I'm not saying you got to get like clubbed in the head, but it really doesn't take that hard of a hit where all of a sudden you're in the middle of grappling and maybe you get a smack across the face, or you get a light punch or something that hits you that you're going, oh my God, I'm getting hit right now.
Yeah.
If you don't ever experience that, whenever you do get hit, if you ever have to protect yourself, like, it's going to be a bad day for you. But at the same time, I'm not willing to say that sport jiu-jitsu is mutilated and that it's bad. I think that, again, there's a purpose to it, because I still say this: the most important thing that you get from jiu-jitsu at times is not just the techniques. Because think about it this way, like katas and things like that. If you just do katas all day long, I mean, take it like this: if you do technique, like let's say if you had a guy drilling his arm bars, but he never rolls, he's not going to be able to do that live. Like, he has to know what it feels like to go live, right? He has to know what it's like to go with someone and try to do it against a person. That's the secret sauce of jiu-jitsu and combat sports, right? We do it on live opponents. We get inoculated to the stress of the unknown, where, like, again, you don't know what's going to happen, right? You don't know, like, if the person's going to do this, that, whatever. So you get used to that. Even like when you have a brand new guy come into the gym, it's a great test. Well, how does your jiu-jitsu work against someone that doesn't know jiu-jitsu very well? Can you sweep them over? Can you control them? How do you do this when their sort of rhythms of doing it are completely different?
Right.
And so I think that, again, there is a point to it. In the interview that I was listening to, where, again, that, some gyms will say that, hey, like, you can learn self-defense, but they never teach them takedowns. They never teach them how to clinch and lock people up. They never teach them how their jiu-jitsu would work in a fight situation. And that there is some truth to that. I'm kind of in the middle of the fence of it, because I like both. I got into jiu-jitsu to fight, but I ended up liking jiu-jitsu because of the sport.
Yeah.
But I think also is like the sport aspect is one of the reasons why the damn thing's so popular. Because, I mean, I'll be honest, bro, if all I did every day was train to fight someone, like, and you can only train that in a certain way, I wouldn't have kept doing it. I would have been bored. Like, but the intricacies and all the fun that you can have with training with each other and rolling, like, there's a certain point where, I mean, you look at, there's plenty of sport jiu-jitsu competitors that have been in fights, and, like, for instance, Ryan Hall is a great example.
Oh yeah.
At the time, he would like lay on his back, flip upside down, and then like triangle people, right? Gets into a fight, he double legs a guy, gets on top of him, holds him down, like, hey, can someone help me? Matt Serra was a guy who's fought MMA, obviously, but he also did sport jiu-jitsu, and he's really good off of his back as well, right? Yeah. And what does he do? He gets on top of the guy and like just holds him down, and it's like, it's laughable, the person's ability to stop that, And so, again, you look at these guys, and it's not like it doesn't take a rocket doctor to understand that you're not going to try to pull guard and go for a heel hook or something like that in a fight. I'm not saying that someone will bring up the video of the guy that was in the basketball court.
Yeah, sure.
I think that guy was honestly, I think he was, to me, it looks like when the guy, the guy threw a punch and he like locked up and just sort of got knocked over because he was in bad posture, which, again, it says that he wasn't, I mean, he should have been looking at that guy's arm and saying, hey, man, this guy's got his fist clenched, right? And his chest is up. And he's getting ready to throw something. And he got knocked over and fell over. But when he fell over, even if it was not like tactically not the best thing to do, he quickly and was in a position where he could have broken that, just shredded that dude's knee, right? So in the thick of it, even though he tactically did the wrong thing, he was still able to very quickly preserve a position, get himself out of trouble, and then have that guy loaded up, ready to rip his knee apart, right?
Well, you're kind of locking somebody in position, too, because they feel it, for the most part, you'll feel that pressure on your knee. And so that allows you to control their positioning and even a little bit of their distance. And now it depends on where you're at. You don't want to be, was he underneath the guy? Was the guy standing? And he's underneath?
So the guy was standing, and then what happened is he charged him into it, and they sort of fell back. And as they fell back, he kind of just rolled up under him, got into the position.
Yeah, because you can still work those leg locks to sweep. You can still
and you could destroy someone's ability to get back.
Well,
up
exactly.
Fight,
you destroy
right?
their knee. Maybe you take a punch or two. You destroy their knee, and then they can't get up anymore. And then you just do whatever you want.
Right.
But like, I don't know. I feel that there's a place for both things. Obviously, there's we had police officers on the podcast. We had Ruben Alvarez, and we talked about what kind of things do you guys teach? You know, they do 2-on-1 control. They do Kimura grips. They do, you know.
And Ruben was a hardcore competitor, dude. Like
he's good. Yeah, he was
Ruben
really
was
good.
Like he's a solid competitor.
And so was you know, we had the guy from Lexington.
We had Chris.
Yeah, Chris Sizemore. And he, again, I asked him the same thing. You know, what are you teaching these police officers? That and it's the basics. Yeah, so I feel like in a lot of aspects, like the basics are things that is traditional jiu-jitsu, right? I mean, would you agree? Like the things that people learn initially are closed guard. I mean, I would consider half guard to be, you know, traditional, right?
I think half guard's a pretty, because I mean, half guard is just a position that'll happen very naturally,
right?
You know, like even if they don't know what half guard is, they'll like, oh, I can't, I can lock his leg or something, right?
Yeah.
So
So the Gracie style of jiu-jitsu, I mean, we're talking about like close guard. We're talking about mount. We're talking about side control.
But I don't know it. And this is the thing again. Like I'm somewhat ignorant to it because I'll tell a story. So when I first got into jiu-jitsu, right? Again, I got into it for two reasons. I wanted to fight and I wanted to compete. Those are the two reasons I got into it, because I liked competing and wrestling, and I wanted to fight. That was why I got into it. And I remember I tried gyms out because there was a few gyms in the city. And one of the gyms that I went to was it was under that sort of umbrella, right? And I remember and I don't mean to say it this way, but like, you know, just after a little bit of training, I remember going there and like being able to like outroll everyone like that I was going against. And so for me, I was like, well, I don't want to do this because I want to, you know, but that said, everybody has their own path.
Right.
For me, I wanted to fight MMA. And I wanted to do competitions, so I needed to do that. You know, some people don't necessarily have that thing. They don't like they're focused on different stuff, and that's fine. For me, that was the right path that I needed. And so again, you know, I think there's a place for all of it within it.
Yeah, you know, I think that the one, whether you train self-defense, quote unquote, or sport jiu-jitsu, I think the key element for me is live sparring. That has to be there in both, because I think that if you don't do strikes at all, like say you just do sport jiu-jitsu, you don't do any type of strikes, but if you do live sparring, you're going to at least get a little bit of a feel of positions and things like that. So if you are in a situation on the street, I think you'll be used to that.
Muscle memory is built.
Well, you'll be used to that intensity as well, because I think that's part of it too. Like if you're just doing katas and you're throwing strikes, but you're only throwing them kind of very, very limited fashion, if you get in a street fight, you're probably gonna, you know.
Well, it's like competitions. I know, like a lot of times, people from the sort of self-defense side of the community love to crap all over jiu-jitsu competitions, but man, like jiu-jitsu competitions will mess you up mentally, right? I mean, I get no less than like 10 questions a day from people who are having, you know, problems with doubt and things like that when it comes 100%. To getting ready for competitions. And then they get in there and it's so intense. Like it's just a whirlwind of chaos and you can't think and you just have to react to the situation, and you don't know this person. They don't like you. They're going to try to rip your head off. And it's a crazy situation. And again, what is I mean, again, the actual situation, like the exacts are not necessarily the same as a fight, right? But that feeling of intensity, that's very much the same, right? Again, people even from the self-defense side will crap on MMA fights. They'll say, it's not realistic. But well, maybe it's not realistic in the sense that like the person could like bite me or something. But I'll be honest with you, like those fights, holy crap! Like you want to talk about intensity and being able to deal with stress. There's nothing like that. You know, it's like listening to some of my friends that are soldiers or that were soldiers at one point. They fought and saw combat. They would talk about the first time they engaged, right? You know, they train you for it and they do all this stuff, but that first time, man, of actually having like people shoot at you, that's a different thing. And being in a situation where, you know, you can roll in the gym and you can do all this stuff in a safe environment, but the first time you go to a jiu-jitsu competition or you fight in MMA and you go into a situation where you're not in your comfortable gym that you're used to, you know that the situation is not, you know, focused around the safety of you as a person. You find out, this guy's going to try to rip my face off. I could get hurt if I'm not careful, and bad stuff could happen.
Right.
Like that really weighs on you. And so
Yeah.
again, there's, to me, when you're getting back to it, one of the most valuable things we get is the ability to operate and for our muscle memory to take over under extremely stressful conditions. It has to be that way. This is why, like, guys who, again, who train with their weapons, right? They do things under stressful conditions, if they're real serious about it, right? Because again, you can go to the range and like take a shot, right? Oh, well, great. But what happens when someone's taking a shot back at you, or what happens when you're scared and you're nervous or whatever? You have to, all that, like there's some guys that I know that really train with their weapons, and they'll just do repetitions of drawing their weapon from the holster, just pop, 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 over and over and over again, over and over again. And the reason for that is because when stuff hits the fan, you can't think, right? And so again, like, you can try to come up with crazy, like, specific scenarios and do this, but when it comes down to it, you're not going to be able to think. It has to be autopilot.
Right.
And so you've got to have stress coming in, and you've got to, like you're saying, live sparring, you've got to then test that stuff under live conditions where things are a little crazy and unpredictable and chaotic, and you've got to be able to operate. And it can't come from an operation of, well, this is what I'm going to do. It has to operate from you go. Your body has to instinctually be able to do something. It's like the old quote from Salo, right? He's like, what is it? If you're slow, you think. If you think, you muscle. If you muscle, you get tired. If you tired, you die. Something to that effect, right? Basically, if you have to think about it, it's not going to work because you're a step behind.
Yeah, it's all about that. You have that optimal environment. If it's the gym, you have soft mats. You have mats on the wall. You have your buddies. You trust them. It's on the street. You don't know what's around. Like, so it's stressful. The stress is the key component, I think. And then so when you are doing a tournament with somebody you don't know. You don't know what they're capable of. You don't know what their skill set is. All you know is that maybe you're supposedly, quote unquote, the same level. The fear of the unknown is kind of one of, I think, the key ingredients in that whole scenario to be effective. Whether it's if you do sport jiu-jitsu and you want to be effective or be able to protect yourself on the street, I think you have to compete or at least train in a live scenario. But here's an interesting, I was thinking about styles of jiu-jitsu, like different, what kind of techniques, and some people play more of a lapel guard, some people play more of, think of a sport jiu-jitsu. I would consider the sport jiu-jitsu would be like 10th Planet or rubber guard. I think that's more of that's a sport jiu-jitsu, but he developed it for fighting,
right.
Exactly.
And there's guys like Ben Saunders, who like uses it really well. Even my buddy Brent, like who we've had on the show before, when he was fighting in Bellator, he used a lot of rubber guard. He used a lot of rubber guard with what do they call it? Mission control. Right. So he would use a lot of it, and so again, you find out how to like manipulate these things from one to the other. There's even guys like Verdun who used half guard. I watched him use half guard in a fight before. I've done in one of my fights, I did an arm drag from butterfly guard and came up to the guy with a single leg. It was you have to change the way that you use distance on it.
Sure.
But again, jiu-jitsu can be adapted. And, again, my sport jiu-jitsu was incredibly helpful. All the wrestling that I did was incredibly helpful when I was fighting MMA. And even the few situations that I've had to be in a fight situation and protect myself, like, it really wasn't that big of a deal. Like, I remember one of my students, he came up to me one day, and he was talking because he's in law enforcement. He was like, man, like, I didn't realize how powerful this stuff was. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, dude, it's like laughably easy how well this works. He's like, I had a guy the other day that tried to come up to me, and he's like, I just like arm dragged him. And again, because the guy got up close enough and they were like clenched up, and he just, from an over under clinch, he was locked up with the guy. He just like got the arm and pulled him over to the side and just took him. Because I know we're going to start to go on tangents. I just want to sort of end this little section of it with this. So when people ask me, do I think that like sport jiu-jitsu, well, honestly, a lot of times there's a distinction between like Gracie jiu-jitsu and that self-defense style jiu-jitsu and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. It's like it's considered two different things.
So you're saying Gracie and self-defense is like one?
Well, not necessarily, but I'm saying like, like the self-defense community is one thing, but like the person that originally said this, mutilation, was a Gracie jiu-jitsu teacher, right? It was a Gracie family member, and said it was a mutilated art. And so I don't think that Brazilian jiu-jitsu is any more mutilated than judo was for jiu-jitsu, or that anything else, right? I mean, because again, they're all different, and they're different forms of expression based upon the situations that they were focused on. And so again, I don't think it's any more mutilated than them, and I think that it'll continue to morph and change, just as people's desires change, just as the world around us changes, right? I mean, it's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But
like, I feel like self-defense wise,
Mm-hmm.
when we talk about self-defense, strictly self-defense, a lot of the things that you learn in the beginner classes is that Gracie Jiu-Jitsu self-defense things. Like,
if that's what it is, I don't know.
Because you're doing. Well, what are you doing? You're doing.
Well, what I mean is when I don't, that word Gracie's Jiu-Jitsu's like, I don't like to define someone, because it's like, I mean, like, you can watch, there's guys like that come from Gracie Jiu-Jitsu schools that are incredible like competitors, and they're good fighters. Right. So it's like, I don't want to put anyone into some sort of box.
Well, let's just say self-defense then.
But when we talk about like the fundamentals of Jiu-Jitsu,
right,
the full guard, really tight pressure, learning how to control things, everything has to be tight.
Right.
That's fundamental stuff, and that's what you're going to use in a fight. Right.
Yeah.
You're not going to play, De La Hiva. You're not going to play inverted guard. You're not going to make space. Because like one of the big differences is when you begin to convert your jiu-jitsu for a fight situation, one of the biggest issues is the distance has to be, it's much different than traditional grappling. In traditional grappling, we stay in a mid-range. Yep. We stay like almost just to arm's reach away, because that's the quick, like, so for instance, if we're going for a takedown, I want to be about a bent arm's reach away. If I'm grappling with you, a lot of times if I'm in butterfly guard, I'll be kind of just sitting there about, a half arm's length away and going in for my sweeps until I get tight. In a fight situation, you're either really, really tight to control the ability for them to punch, or you get really far away to create the distance so they can't hit you.
Right.
You're kind of in or out. There's not a lot of time spent in the middle, because if you're in the middle, you're taking unnecessary shots. At least it's the way I look at it, right? And so for me, when I was converting my jiu-jitsu for a fight situation, that's what it was always focused on, and it's neat what happens, because I remember even like I've had a couple guys over the years come in to train with us, and one of them was like, talking about wanting to fight or whatever, and he wasn't ready for it, and he was he didn't believe me that he wasn't ready for a fight. So I said, hey man, dude, here's what I want you to do. I gave him gloves, put them on. I was like, just try to hit me. Try to hit me. If you can hit me square on the face, then we'll talk. And I started playing guard. And when you learn how to like lock people up, and even like swivel your hips in a certain way, you learn how to you get a sixth sense about how someone's punching. So if they start to do something, you can swivel to the side and protect yourself and lock them up. And you learn how to do these things. And it's a valuable skill. And so again, going back to what he said though, while I don't agree with the idea that it's a mutilated art, I do agree that, I think if you're going to do this and if you want to say, because some people don't care, but if you're going to say, man, I'm doing this for self-defense, you should at some point understand how your jiu-jitsu works in a live fighting situation where people are trying to throw punches, and trying to do things that aren't like the normal grappling thing,
Yeah, I learned quickly, because I like to play like a knee shield or Z guard, whatever you want to call it. I learned quickly that's not really the best guard in a self-defense situation. It can be to an extent. You don't want to stay there in that mid-range. You either get underneath, to go for a sweep, or, create space. So I learned that when we had some time to train with some gloves on. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about if somebody does want to train for self-defense. Or if you want to incorporate, so we are kind of a gym that does a little bit of both.
Yep.
But you want to incorporate that. So one thing we
have a culture of fighting in our gym.
Yeah, so we do have guys that box, we do have guys that do kickboxing, we do have guys that fight MMA,
and we have guys. And this is just my in all honesty, we have guys that don't necessarily train for fighting, but they're just rough and tumble people. Right, like they're just rowdy.
Yeah,
and so it's like, you know what I mean. Like, so they have no problem.
They like that.
Yeah,
they like that.
They have no problem putting on the gloves and testing it out a little bit and playing around.
So let's talk about maybe training that, and that's something we had kind of discussed about maybe incorporating back in, because it's something you did a while back, a few years back. It was part of and that's part of some of the classes.
Well, it's funny, we were talking about that. I was planning on doing it in April because I was going to do pans in March, and then in April I was like, I had like 2 weeks sort of reserved away where we were going to like take a bunch of stuff that we've been learning. Like, all right, now we're going to see how this works with fight punches and stuff like that. Take all that boxing and kickboxing you guys have learned if you've done it, and then we're going to combine it in with our jiu-jitsu, and then talk about how to work in all the ranges from top to on the feet down to the bottom, and understand how all this works, so you can understand how your jiu-jitsu works in a fight. Yeah.
So let's talk about maybe training that. What do you think is I don't want to say ideal, but what do you think is maybe one of the better scenarios? MMA gloves, boxing gloves, open hand strikes, maybe just striking to the body, kind of like a, we did that one video with combat jiu-jitsu, which was funny.
Each other.
Just slapping each other around. But what do you think is in your opinion, since you fought MMA and you've done all these things, you've been in some street fights, what do you think is the best avenue to train that, then maybe he's going to have the best carryover.
Well, I think you have to have takedowns first.
Okay.
Like I don't think that you can realistically say that like you have good self-defense abilities if you can't do a takedown.
Okay.
It's laughable because it's like, again, you have to be able to be comfortable with takedowns. You just have to be. Because people can talk about wrestling or judo or whatever. Go watch videos of wrestlers take someone down on a hard surface. Go watch a judo guy, because there's plenty of videos out there, and that's another thing. Like there's videos out there of just these sport competitors and just regular or MMA fighters or just like people that train a little bit of wrestling or judo that then protect themselves, And so when you see these guys, when they slam someone onto hard surfaces,
it's rough.
There's no more, right? That's all she wrote. Like most of the time, people don't get up after they've been slammed onto concrete, even if they're still coherent. They're like, it's a shock to their system.
Well, think about like the trauma, like how like much pressure it is from both ends. Like you're getting sandwiched between a body and the ground. So like think of how much how much that pushes that air out of you. Like, you ever had the air knocked out of you?
Yeah,
I mean, horribly
absolutely.
bad. I mean, that is. Well, I mean, you can't move. You can't even breathe, but you can't even like function. Can't say a word.
Well, even that's how I found out that like this is how I found out wrestling was a fighting art, right? Because in high school, because I grew up, I went through this phase where I got jumped, and in 7th grade I got chubby and overweight, and I was very insecure, right? And I started doing wrestling, and I didn't realize that wrestling was a way to fight, right? And then I remember one day a kid came up and punched me in the chest. We're walking up from like lunch, boom, punched me in the chest, right? And it was like open chest kind of stuff. I don't know if you guys did that. He just like punched me in the chest and just like looked at me. And I remember like I water boyed, right? I did like the Adam Sandler water. Stop making fun of me. And I double legged him. I picked him up off of his seat. Blast double leg. I mean, picked him up off. He's in the sky, and he lands from my body height down into like one of those old school like radiators. I slammed him into that sucker as hard as I could, and I got up on top, and I'm like hovering over top of him, just angry, breathing, right? And I remember looking at him, and there was his eyes, there was fear, because it was like, whoa. Like, because again, I was so timid back then that nobody expected it, and then I just blasted him off of his feet.
Was he doing it in a way to like just be a jerk, or like was it playing a game?
Well, no, it was a thing where like there was
like a game,
No, there was a few guys that would like pick on me.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't stand up for myself because again, my confidence was so low, but I've been wrestling and I started kind of becoming more confident myself and felt stronger, and then I just muscle memory kicked in.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it.
Yeah.
It just went boop, double leg into old radiator, and then realized, oh, like this is a fighting art. So then I would go around school and I would go to the sections of the hallway that I used to avoid, because that's where all these dudes that would pick on me were, and I would like walk down there. I'd wait for them, like I would like try to mess with them, and if they mess with me, boom, double leg.
It's like you got the secret power. Like
You had a secret power, and they didn't know how to deal with it. Because you could lock them up and then boom, dump them, and that surface, dude, is so hard. And what was funny was from doing that, from just slamming people, like slamming a handful of bullies, nobody messed with me anymore. I remember like it was like, because you'd slam them, they were done fighting. I remember I got this reputation in school, where I remember one day on the football, one of the guys on the football team, it was funny. His name, we called him Bennett. So I'm sitting there at one of the pep rallies, and where I'm sitting there and I'm just listening, and there's a guy. I think his name was Pettis, big guy. He's like 275 pounds, and he was tall, about 6'4", and he had come from another school and was like his first year with us. And we're at this pep rally, and he's like kicking me. He's kind of like just pestering me, right, messing with me. And I looked around and said, "Hey man, stop it," turn back around, keep kicking me, right? And then I was like, "Hey man, stop it." And then I turned back around one more time. I said, "Hey man, if you don't stop it," I was like, let's fight or whatever. Said something like that, So I'm gonna stand for myself. So then Bennett, he's back there with me. And Bennett was about 295, a little bit shorter, and he was big like O lineman, D lineman. I remember just kind of hearing him say, he's like, "Man, don't mess with Nick. He's a crazy white boy," And it was so funny because then he stopped pestering me. I was like, sweet, I didn't have to do it. My reputation, it was awesome.
I think about bullying, right? And I'm like, how much of bullying actually starts as like mental warfare, like mental. You're trying to push somebody's buttons to see if mentally they break, or if they mentally like are kind of, you're trying to push them in the corner and see what they're gonna do, right? So it's mental, because usually bullies, in many cases, or I don't know, but they would probably see if you stand up for yourself, they might leave you alone. If you're initially like
every bully I've ever had that I stood up for myself, they didn't mess with me anymore.
Yeah,
because they're like, easy pickings. I gotta go find something else.
Right.
I'm not gonna fight you. I'm not gonna like. You want to go after the easiest kill. It's like watching like the friggin' tiger sitting there and the wildebeest goes in. They're not going after the big ones. They go after the ones that get straggling behind. Because it's like, you don't want to go after the toughest target. You go after the one that's a little bit easier. Yeah. And so when your body language screams lack of confidence, and when you know you're not going to stand up for yourself, you get them. Yeah. So absolutely.
Yeah. So it kind of started, because I think, your physical ability to take somebody down, to do that also brought fear to other people.
Yeah. Freaked
right.
out.
So that's kind of some mental warfare there on your end. So you're just like, yeah, I'll do this to you. Yeah. Like, what to expect if you mess with me. And I think wrestling is the takedown. I know we're getting off on tangent like we said we would, but the wrestling component is like the controlling the distance. Like if you watch some of the first UFCs with Hoist, what did he do? He'd kick, right? He had the little straight kick.
He'd kick and go for a takedown.
And then and he kind of shot a little bit, but he kind of used that kick to gauge the distance.
It was to kind of keep distance from the person. He would kick him to kind of stay away, and then he would rush him for
and
a
I don't
takedown.
think he ever threw like a right hand. I think he just like threw a jab and like a front kick.
It was all just like kind of like just throwing something up to keep him honest, because then to come in, right? That was it.
And so like I think covering that space, that distance, that's number one, right? You got to train on the feet. So that's one. Okay. And then go from there. Like what about
so as far as like the actual fighting on the ground, right? So you can do open hand strikes, which are perfectly fine. I always liked training a little bit with gloves because I was really fighting,
What kind of gloves?
MMA gloves.
Okay.
You can do MMA gloves. You can do boxing gloves if you wanted to. I remember we used to do a drill where we would have one guy who would simply have boxing gloves on, and he would try to punch the person, not crazy hard, but harder, a little bit harder. Yeah. And, because of the fact that they're bigger, you're not going to get cuts or anything like that. And the other person would just learn how to block the punches, right? But MMA gloves are good. They allow you to grapple. And again, you can, if you have a good training partner, the way that we always used to do it is if we were training light, you would hit lighter to the face, just enough to kind of let them know, hey, I'm hitting you. You need to block this,
right.
But not softer. It's not so soft that it didn't bother him, but enough that it made him like take notice. And then to the body, you could light him up. Right? It's whatever. Like just get used to it. But then what that did is you then had the stimulus of getting hit, and even if you're not getting hit as hard as like humanly possible, it's enough that makes you go, oh crap, I'm getting hit. I need to move. And then getting hit to the body, you can lock things up, whatever, but. I think there's a myriad of different ways, but I think you just have to have that striking stimulus in there along with the grappling to really understand how all that works together. Because if you don't, it's just not going to work. And I think that you definitely have to have trust with your training partners. You got to know, like, hey, man, listen, we're not trying to knock each other out. We're trying to train this position, get that stimulus there. Because I've seen some self-defense stuff done where it's like everything's done in nice, slow, controlled situations, and someone comes into the gym and they learn this cool move, and they don't actually ever do it live, and they think that it's like you got a little bit of information, but it's never become understanding, right? Because information doesn't get converted into understanding and knowledge until there's some sort of feeling associated with it. So for instance, someone can tell you, Eugene, don't touch the hot stove. You don't understand it yet. You touch that hot stove, right. Ooh, it's hot. You understand it now. And this is the way that jiu-jitsu works, right? This is the way that everything works. We learn it, right? And you can be a parrot, and you can regurgitate it, and you can do it. But then, you don't understand it really until you actually do it live, until you've had some experience with it under those conditions. Then all of a sudden, if you take it and you've actually went into a live situation of some sort with it, then you get understanding because there's a feeling associated with it. Maybe, for instance, you have a really good baseball choke, right?
Loop choke.
Loop choke, excuse me. Loop choke. I'm getting old. Forgetting stuff. Loop choke, right? So you got your loop choke. Well, the first time you used it and you all of a sudden it just clicked and you choke, you have a positive feeling. I understand this a little bit better now, or if you go to do it and all of a sudden it got stopped, negative feeling. I understand that this is not, again, that's where the understanding of something comes from. And so I think that there's times where I've seen people do self-defense stuff. I've had students come to me that have come from gyms that were more self-defense based, and we're like, yeah, we learned it, but we never did it live. No one ever threw a punch at me. We never got hit enough to where it made me take notice. So it's like, yeah, you learned it, but you don't really know it. It sounds good. It's like when you see those like weekend like self-defense seminars for women or something. It's like, it's garbage. It's like, that's not gonna work. Like, you think that like that one move is like, I understand that you think that the nut grab is going to do it, but like there's got to be a little bit more substance to it, and it has to be a long-term thing, because it's not about the stuff that you're learning, it's who we're turning you into.
Yeah.
That's the difference, right? So I could tell you all the information you need to know, right? Someone could come into my gym and say, listen, Chewy, I need to know what it means to be a black belt. Show me all the techniques I need to be a black belt. Sure, I'll show them to you, and you could kind of regurgitate them a little bit, but that's not what's important. What's important is that when you train consistently, you are transforming yourself into something new that then is able to do this stuff in a different situation, right? Because again, we understand that I could show you a technique, but you're not ready to use it yet, right? I show you a technique one time, you practice it a couple times, it doesn't matter, right? Because you're not ready for it. Your body hasn't absorbed the lessons. Your body hasn't hardened. Your body hasn't begun to adapt to the stimulus of training. Right. So it's a different thing. So we're not just looking at information. We're talking about changing that person. And so I think it's important for people to understand that when you're learning your self-defense techniques, just like you were saying earlier, you have to do them in a live situation. Otherwise, you're just kidding yourself. It sounds good. Like, hey, I know this technique. That's great, man. But when you get punched in the face, you're going to forget it. And because you've never done it live, you're not going to have the muscle memory that's going to kick in to take over.
Well, yeah, a lot of it's just being because think about it. When as a white belt, my very first tournament, I remember I got out there and I literally forgot
everything.
I was like, what? How do I take this person down? I got mounted. How do I get out of mount?
Yeah.
Well, how do I not die?
Does that match seem like a blur to you? My early wrestling matches and jiu-jitsu matches, they would happen, and I would get off the mat and honestly, it was like I was not really coherent the whole time. It was just all happening so fast, and then it was like, it's over. Like it would be a blur to me.
My first match, it was weird. Like it was like I felt like it was in slow motion. The takedown aspect was in slow motion when we clinched. I never felt anything like it in my life. I was like, this is the weirdest.
Body's so hyped up.
I was so hyped up on adrenaline, and I played team sports. I'd never done. I maybe trained 6 months.
Yeah.
But I remember I was on the ground. I was like, what the fuck am I doing? Why am I doing this right now? And but it was just like I would never take it back. I would never not do jiu-jitsu. I just think I gained so much doing that as a white belt. Like I always tell people, you should compete at white belt. Even if you don't want to be a competitor, you don't want to be this world champion, your jiu-jitsu will get so much better.
It's a rite of passage.
Well, and you're going to know this works, this doesn't, or this needs work, this is okay, or whatever. Usually it's, I need to work on this because this is not. So I think that like a real life scenario or real life-esque scenario where there are more variables where it's not perfect. It's like, oh, well, they're going to place their hand here perfectly, and I'm going to do this. No, it's like their hand may be positioned.
It's very unpredictable.
Yeah, and that unpredictability allows you to account for all the variables and all the extra shit that's going on in the environment, and allows you to still continue and perform that technique, which I think is, that's implementation. That's how effectiveness, you're solidifying everything.
Well, I mean, if you look at, and the cool thing is everybody's got a damn camera phone. So like you have an abundance of fights on the internet.
Oh my God. I mean, it's too much almost now.
I mean, you've got so many, right? But the thing is you see there's almost a predictability of the chaos, right? I mean, like it's going to be predictably chaotic, right? Like fights don't happen in nice, controlled situations. Every now and then you'll get two guys and they'll square off and they'll start circling and stuff like that. But in most cases, the fights kind of erupt, out of a thing. And so you got to be able to read body language, And I also think that I go back to this before. Another thing is, along with your training, you should develop the ability to be secure enough to walk away. Right, because you don't want to fight, man.
Yeah, you talked about that.
Yeah,
too.
you mean that whole thing, being secure in who I am as a person. My ego is secure enough that someone can make fun of me, right? I mean, because I get it every day. I wake up, and I get online, and people are just trash talking me, right?
Still?
Oh, dude, absolutely. Like one. I mean,
You'll have to share something.
Yeah, it would be. We'll share some troll comments. You know what I mean, from time to time. But yeah, I've gotten all kinds of negative things. But the thing is I'm secure in who I am and what I've done. I'm fine. Like, you can make fun of me all you want to, but I know the actual truth of who I am.
Yeah.
Right. So your words don't really mean much to me.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing. If I go out and someone calls me something, I'm like, okay. Like, as long as you're over there and you're not bothering me, it's like, whatever. If you put your hand on me, if you get close to me, if you start approaching me like you're going to fight me, or if you're going to touch my woman, you're going to have problems. And the approaching part, I will walk away as much as I can. But if you continue to approach me, I'm taking that as we're fighting. You know what I mean? I'm not going to wait for you to throw the first punch. It's like, just back up, and I'm going to do my best to get away from that. I'm going to be the nicest dude in the world. But if you continue to approach, then that's on you. I've told you not to. But I think that people should be willing to walk away from fights. Again, like, you should not use the stuff that you're training and walk around like, a jerk. And most people don't. Because, again, a lot of times through training, especially when you're training hard, man, like, you don't really have the drive in you. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I can think about, most people have probably had this experience. You go into the gym and you're stressed out. You're driving to the gym and, like, people are cutting you off, and you're almost ready to just get on and just, I'm going to choke the person, whatever. You're all stressed out and angry. Had a rough day at work. You get done training, you're driving home, you're like, guy cuts you off, you're like, oh man, I hope he's not running late for somewhere. I mean, like, you're so much so much lighter mentally, and like, you're just so much more relaxed, and it's such a beautiful thing. And so I think that a lot of times when you get that sort of energy out, you don't really need to.
You have nothing to prove. There's nothing for you to, there's nothing for you to really. You don't have to prove anything to yourself because you're
being tested every day.
You are,
right? And so you should be able to walk away. So I think it's an important thing, and you also should be keen to reading people's bodies. So if you're in those situations, like, you also have to be aware of people's body language, right? Like, is that guy's fist clenched up? Yeah. Like, what's he doing with that? Like, or like, maybe is he in line with me? Like, if he's approaching me, is he in line to where he could throw a punch? Could I step offline to make it harder to punch me? Those are some things that you can keep in mind. You know what I mean? And that was stuff that, like, my old coach used to talk about because he bounced. He's like, step offline. Like, you don't ever let someone square up with you. If they're gonna fight you, get offline. And even, like, put your hands up, like, put them on their shoulder. Hey, I'm hands are up. I'm whatever, but that's so you can block. So if someone throws a punch, boom, you can put your hand up to block.
Yeah, that's actually a great point you bring up. Footwork component. Standing up, because
body positioning.
When you think about it, like, boxers, they say, and they say about, like, be out on the, I guess, your lead foot on the outside kind of thing. A lot of times,
boxing is about creating angles.
Right. So, because you think, and I'm not a boxer by any means.
Well,
so
it's very simple. If your hands are up, you're much weaker if I go off at an angle. Right. So your frontal, and this is even the nerdy side of me. Like, when I read about military history, it's no different, right? It's called flanking, right? So you flank a side. So we can do a frontal attack, which is always going to be so much more difficult because it's like, there's the defense, right? But if we do an attack from the rear or from the flank, where you're most vulnerable, right? Like, then there's a problem, because now you can't. If I'm going for the front, all your defense, everything that you have available, all your weapons, all your defense, it's all right here in front. But if I'm at a side, right, you're at a disadvantage, because now that arm, like, so if I get to your left side, you have your left arm there to do.
Yeah, you're on the outside of my.
But your whole right side's gone until you turn towards me, and so that's. I mean, this isn't true even in jiu-jitsu. You think about, like, most of your moves, right? What do? We create angles. If we go for an armbar, we don't do it straight up. We cut an angle.
Right.
If we go for a particular guard pass, like a knee slice, what do? You cut an angle. So angles are always important.
Yeah, I think that's something that's kind of interesting. In jiu-jitsu, we do that from a ground perspective, but maybe training that as well is kind of important, and just maybe even having a couple of teaching jiu-jitsu guys how to throw a punch, and then, like, for me, like, throwing a punch and then incorporating that with a takedown or closing down the distance, or clinch work, whatever. I think those are key. I was just thinking about. I keep smiling because I was thinking about some stupid self-defense techniques, like that one woman. They had this ginormous gentleman. And her. He did like a rear naked choke.
The one where she, like,
and
put
she used her chin.
Yeah.
And he goes, I would watch it over and over, and I'd show my wife, and I would just laugh about it. And I was like, "You're probably gonna hurt people by showing them this."
It was like the most cheesy self-defense video. It was like, he goes, like, she, like, grabs her head and pull, like, the guy gets her, and, like, so for you guys that haven't seen it, like, just it was like Ladies of America.
Ladies of yeah.
It's like, hey there, Ladies of America. Like, we're gonna show you how to do this. So this big guy. I mean, this guy's jacked. He goes up behind her, puts her in like a rear naked choke, like a loose one, and his forearms up under her chin, and she like grabs the top of her head and then pulls it down so that her chin goes into the meat of his forearm.
Yeah.
And I mean, this dude goes, oh, ow, like, and he's like, that really hurt or whatever. What was funny is, I mean, that woman was probably about 110 pounds, 115. Yeah. That dude was about like 250, 260.
At least.
Like, it ain't happening. Well, and it's even like the groin strike. It's always the groin strike. Always the groin strike.
I think that would probably work.
Bro, if you're in a situation where like you're heated or if something bad's going on, like, you're gonna have to what if you have jeans on and stuff? It's not as easy as just hitting it like that. Like if your kid comes up to you, there's always this neat thing, right? I don't know if you've experienced it before, right? Like, so for instance, I used to fight MMA, and I mean, dude, I would like get hit and I didn't even care. Like, I get punched in the face and I'd be like, yeah, give me more. Like it just didn't bother me. But then I can be training jiu-jitsu and I'm not expecting to get hit, and someone will like just barely flick my nose. I'm like, ooh, it hurt. Ooh, my nose, right? Like, it's one of these things where when you are in a certain mindset and you're ready for that, it doesn't bother you. But when you're not ready for it, it bothers you. So if someone's going to attack you, they're going to be ready for you to do some crazy stuff to try to fight back.
Right.
So it's going to have to be a little bit more substance than just go for the groin. Because the groin could work, especially if you get in there and you can really rip something out.
Oh, God.
Or maybe like get in there and really stomp it a bit. But as far as like just one hit or something like that, like that's not going to end it. That's not going to stop it, especially if that person has terrible intentions.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you have to go into situations where you've got to turn yourself into a stronger human being for those situations. Not just learn a technique. See, this is what we think. We live in a society that can Google everything, right? Put in a question to Google and it'll give you an answer, and now you think, I've got an answer. So you think you know something, right? But again, you don't know anything. Like, you haven't done anything with it, right? There's no understanding truly to it, right?
Yeah.
So for instance, like, someone could say, they can get on Google. I had a buddy of mine, right? And he was all into business stuff, right? Go to the business seminars, he learn all this stuff. He could regurgitate like a parrot, just tell you all this stuff. But he didn't have any part of that in his business. Right? I'm like, well, why didn't you do it? You don't understand this. You're talking about it. It sounds good, but you haven't done anything with it, right? And this is the same thing. You learn a technique, right? Oh, I learned the technique. Good. What are you going to do with it? You got to go use it now, right? So again, it's like one of these things where I think that, and that was one of the beautiful parts about judo, right? Like, judo was like, well, let's take out some of these like strikes and stuff. Now let's really hard, like, let's go after each other hard with the sort of non-lethal techniques, and then we can just tap out. We'll just kind of do that. That was a really unique sort of thing, because not a lot of things did that. Because the traditional jiu-jitsu, I've even been to those practices before. They're training these strikes and everything else, and again, they do them in a sort of quasi sort of realistic state. They do their best to do them without killing each other, right? But with judo, you can just go. With jiu-jitsu, you can just go, right? Even boxing, they do certain types of sparring and things like that where you can just go,
right?
And that lends itself to making you a more effective person. It's not just the techniques; it's the person that you are developed through the training methodology. That's the really important part, because you could take the techniques, take out the training methodology. I mean, maybe they work every now and then, but you combine the training methodology with the good techniques, and that's something special.
Do you I'm wondering why, going back to just why we started talking about this exact topic. Is jiu-jitsu really mutilated? Is that really bad for, I don't even want to say martial art, the sport, or the it's evolving. The practice? I mean, it's evolution, right?
That's what I'm saying. It's evolving. So
it's not bad.
So think about it this way, like, the times changed in Japan, the martial art changed.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they were no longer in the same time period. They weren't fighting with the same weapons. Life was changing. We live in a different world than like back in the day, than these Brazilian guys that were in the 1950s, right? I mean, like, we live in a different time. And the things are different. What we do day to day is very different, right?
Yeah.
And so again, people are going to, it's an expression. There is a fighting element to it, but all of these things are martial art. There's an art form to it, right? It's a fighting art.
Yeah.
And art, this is the beautiful thing about mixed martial arts, right? All these guys are fighting, and they're all effective fighters, right? In like the UFC and Bellator and stuff, these are all tough fighters. They all have different styles. They're all effective.
Yeah.
Right? Not wrong or right. They're just different, right? Because of the way that they've been able to go. It would just be the same way. Imagine if I went into my gym, right? Our gym, and I said, you know what? You can only do these techniques that I give you. No, none of that stuff off YouTube. No, just what I show you, and it's going to be my stuff, the stuff that I'm best with. Well, I mean, you're going to get left out on a lot of stuff you could have been good with. Because I'll tell you right now, I'm not going to loop chokes, right? But you got good with them, and now you can share them with other people, right? Tim Huber, he's got a good baseball choke. He showed it to other people. Chad had a good triangle. I'm not very good with triangles, but Chad showed his triangle, and then people picked it up. I like the idea of being able to let people express themselves in the way that they want to, instead of telling them, no, you can't do it that way or whatever, you know. And I think that's the way with the art as a whole. It's evolving as people are changing it and messing around with it.
I think it has to, and I think sometimes, and maybe I'm wrong in saying this, that people are afraid of change, so they hang on to, you know, what they know, what they see as effective, and they're afraid to kind of step outside the box and see it. You know, I think it was kind of with rubber guard was a little bit, people were like, well, what is this weird rubber guard stuff? Like,
leg locks are a great
example.
Know,
it's like 10th planet. What's 10th planet? Like, this is like some weird subset of jiu-jitsu, but honestly, like, it's extremely effective. It's effective in the sport jiu-jitsu realm and also in self-defense, because, you know, Eddie Bravo developed that rubber guard specifically for closing the distance, you know, in an MMA fight. Like if somebody's got, or, you know, in a street fight.
Now, here's the thing. A lot of times when you use the word self-defense, people will say, well, in a self-defense fight, he could bite, he could use a knife or whatever. And my thing is when you start getting into those variables, like, I mean, the guy could have a rocket launcher, a machine gun or something. What are you going to do then? I mean, it's like you can get
try to walk away, I guess, or run away.
Exactly. It's like there's a million variables, right? And you can't control those.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But like, how many times has all these crazy things that you're talking about happened? You know, it's like, I mean, how many, like, most people haven't experienced those. Right. I mean, most people that do jiu-jitsu, they're paying a kind of a hefty fee per month.
Yeah.
It's not like they're living in like the worst neighborhoods most of the time. You know, they're not subjected to all these situations. Right? And I have police officers that train with me, and like, not one of them in law enforcement, and I've got plenty, has ever come up to me and said, you know what, man, this stuff doesn't work.
Of course it works.
But that's what I'm saying. But I'm saying, like,
yeah,
again,
I know.
What the thing is like you can get off into the specifics, right? So it's the difference between principles versus a tactic, right?
Yeah.
So for instance, like in a business sense, right, we could get off into, like, for instance, you know, you could talk about the idea of following up with your customers. So hey, follow up with them. Follow up is incredibly important for your business. You know, that is where true, like, business growth typically happens, right? Most people are focused on just like getting new people in, but continuing to develop a relationship with those people that are already there, that's really important. Now, you could talk about just that basic principle, follow up. We need to follow up. But then we go, well, how? Like, what kind of email do you send them? What do you write in your email? Like, it's like, don't worry about that. Like, talk about building the relationship, and that will govern that principle. Wanting to build a relationship and develop that follow up, however means you want to do it. Developing it, that's a principle that then you apply to however you want to do it. Just do that. Right? Let that govern you. And so we can talk about, like, well, what if you go to mount and the guy's got a machete, and then you get, like, well, let's talk about controlling the arms. Let's talk about isolating the hands. Let's talk about controlling good position. And we, as the variables come up, talking about competitions, when you roll hard, whatever it is, in gym or in competition, whatever, those variables come up and you adapt to them. You know, but again, I think that people can get lost in the weeds when they start going, well, what about this? I mean, I get what you're saying, but you're not going to be able to prepare for every single variable. You know, like, what, are you going to have like are you going to, like, you know, make up a storefront and say, well, what if you're going outside of a donut shop on a Thursday at 3:00 and you're walking with your kids, and then there's this guy and he flips over a table. Like, you can get lost in like these situations. You have to focus on the basic principle of what you're doing there.
I have to tell you, I was thinking about when we were training one time, and you had like these rubber knives. You just randomly would throw them at it in the middle of the roll, and like we try to get the knife or the rubber gun. Dude, that was so. If you're ever on the street fighting and somebody just randomly throws a knife in your direction, you know, we're prepared for that scenario.
You know, but it was fun. It was fun to see, because you're like, let's see what happens.
You're just like in it, and all of a sudden there's like just a rubber knife, and you're just sort of scrambling. You forget about everything. Everything,
it just changes. You know,
you're just like scrambling for. So I don't know. I think you're right, man. I think the key is always have an open mind. Have you know, train in as close as life scenario as you can. Have an open mind. You know, be willing to learn. Like, why would you? I mean, MMA is all about like, dude, you got guys like Chuck Liddell, a wrestler. He's knocking everybody out. You know, like he did like different kind of karate and wrestled, and I don't know.
Here's a great example: leg locks. so many jiu-jitsu practitioners were incredibly resistant towards them. Oh, they don't work. They do this. They do that. Oh, it's terrible. Whatever. And none of it was really true. It was just we don't like them because we've been conditioned to not like them,
or we don't want to learn them. It's just it's a whole can of worms, man.
But we started doing leg locks. I really enjoy leg locks, and again, I still hear the injury part, and I tell people all the time, I've seen less injuries once people were more educated on them than before. Because when people didn't know what the hell they were doing, and it's like, well, I saw this on YouTube, this heel hook thing, and like someone gets their knee ripped off. Whereas like they know how to apply it properly, they know how to like tap out, they know when to tap out, they know all the different mechanics of it. It makes more sense to them, and I think that again, a lot of people like leg locks were going on way back then. You saw guys like the great Dean Lister out there submitting people, right? Like
murdering people.
Dude, like I mean, he beat Sal with a knee bar. Like, I mean, Sal is one of the greatest of all time as far as sport jiu-jitsu, and he beat him with a knee bar in the ADCC. It was there. The writing was on the wall. And even as it kept going, 2011, Paul Harris is out there ripping people's legs off. David Avalon was out there doing some leg locks too. All these guys were doing them. Still, and then eventually you had guys like Gordon Ryan and then, Wolverine and Eddie Cummings and all those guys coming out and doing leg locks like crazy, the Meows. All these guys getting into them, and eventually you're going to go, okay, we got to learn them. But it's like, again, when the writing's on the wall, like, don't be resistant towards it. Keep an open mind. Because again, to me, even jiu-jitsu, because one guy, I posted a video of me the other day, like where I was taking this guy down, or a picture.
There's that
picture.
Fight to win?
Yeah, the fight to win.
That's a badass picture.
That's such a cool picture.
I love it.
Where his body's up in the air, my feet are off the air. Like it's just like it's like the Air Jordan. I want to get that into like I want to get that into a silhouette and make a T-shirt or something. Make a brand, right? But no. So in that post, I was talking about like someone was saying like sport jiu-jitsu doesn't have takedowns. I'm like, well, tell me about that. And the guy, he's like, well, isn't this wrestling? And I'm like, yeah, but that's part of jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is not static. It's morphing into something. So just like each one of us becomes as a practitioner, you should not be saying, well, I just do jiu-jitsu. Man, go learn judo. I've been to judo camps. I've been to judo seminars, right? I remember there was a judo silver medalist, an Olympic silver medalist, Neil Adams was in town. I was there in a heartbeat learning from the dude. And I was asking about grip fighting because judo guys grip fight. And I'm like, show me some grip fighting. I love wrestling, and like when wrestlers come in, I like to pick their brain and ask them questions. And so again, each one of us, it's not like a static thing. You should be morphing, just like Hulse Gracie was a great example of that. He was learning all this stuff and bringing it together and making this very different style. And he was said to do a lot of different things back then, playing with leg locks and everything else. Like they talked about that. I remember reading up about him in Compredo and stuff like that. Compredo was another guy that did leg locks way back in the day, in like some of the old mundials. But he beat what is it? The guy that used to have a crazy guard, the Holeta. He beat Holeta with the leg lock. So yeah, he beat Holeta with the leg lock. So, but anyway. The each one of us is morphing. We're each getting better. We're trying to work off the shoulders of the people that made it, helped us out, right? And then as that happens, the art is morphing. So the art's getting more wrestling and leg locks and judo. All this stuff is infusing into it. And so again, to me, like probably one of the philosophical ideas that I hold true for jiu-jitsu is it should be based upon always being open-minded, always learning. You should be always trying to learn. It should never be, I'm done, right? That's why
you're never done.
Yeah, you're not supposed to be, right? But if you say, well, this, like if jiu-jitsu, if this is the complete jiu-jitsu, if this is the right one, then you're saying that none of this stuff has anything to offer and you can write it off. And it's like, well, no. Because you might be doing some lot of cool stuff and we're doing some cool stuff. And what if we just worked on sharing our cool stuff together and everybody learned more of everything, right? Instead of writing everything off. But I think that like even in like the symbol that I use in all my gis and all my rash guards, the Enzo symbol, it's an unfinished circle, which means that you are unfinished, right? We're all a work in progress. And to me, going back to the idea of always improving, if you're done, if you have lost the growth mindset, you're like, I don't need to learn anything more, then you're basically decaying, and to me it's like that's one of the underlying philosophies of jiu-jitsu is like, look, man, we're trying to learn, we're trying to grow, we're trying to get better, we're trying to improve ourselves and learn from this stuff. It's not like a thing you beat. It's not a video game where it's the end. It's just sort of an ever-going sort of thing forever and ever.
Yeah.
I think, when it comes down to it, the way that I see it is whenever you start talking about, like, I appreciate all of it. Like, I have no problem. Like, if someone says, listen, I don't want to do sport jiu-jitsu, I just want to focus on self-defense based
Yeah.
techniques, no problem, do it, bro. And then there's other people that say, I want to do some sport, and I want to learn a little bit. Do it, cool, it's fine.
Yeah.
But I think just kind of writing it off, to me, it's like when you start to say, well, they're just doing it wrong or whatever. To me, it just sounds like, it's like a person saying like, damn music. Like
We're just being close-minded.
back in my day, our music sounded like this. This was good music. Like it sounds like someone that's like listening to new music and they're like, like, shut up, Grandpa, you don't know what it sounds like. Damn kids, this ain't music.
If
to me, it's like it's an art form, and so it's expanding, and you have said I'm done with this, and so now it's changing, and you don't like it.
Chewy, what happens to anything if it doesn't evolve? What happens?
Damn kids, it starts to decay.
They die. You die, right? Like the jiu-jitsu, I think would to an extent die off. Like the popularity would die off if it did not continue to evolve.
Of course. Well, and if the sport aspect wasn't a part of it, it would die off.
It would, because not everybody. Like some kids get into jiu-jitsu for self-defense, and then but and then where do you go from there?
But
right?
even then, like, what do most people like doing when they train? They like rolling with each other.
Yeah.
It's fun. Like it is like that's what most people enjoy doing. They enjoy rolling. Like it's like you learn the techniques and that's fun, and you try to do them on your buddies. But you like rolling with each other. Like that's the fun part. That's the dessert of our classes where you get to train. Like coach comes in and says, "All right, guys, we're gonna get warmed up and just do a rolling session. Woohoo! Right? It's fun. And I think that if like for instance, if you took that away and all we did was focus on like just fighting all the time, I'm like, man, I just want to roll.
Tired of getting punched in the face.
Well, it's just like, it's fine. I just think it's one of those things where, the popularity wouldn't be there because it wouldn't suck people in like it does. Because the training is fun. It's so addictive. You get sucked into it.
Well, I think
it's why we have a whole world right now that's like with the quarantine. They're like, I just want to train so bad. I'm getting jonesing for it.
So I've realized the quarantine thing. Like, if I don't get some kind of movement in, I'm such a jerk.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like, because I'm so used to having jiu-jitsu at least 2-3 days a week. Like, it's really important for me to work out and even run. I've been running.
Oh yeah,
which is, I've realized that running for me is extremely mental. Like,
oh yeah,
Misha challenged my wife
mental.
Challenged me to run faster.
Uh-huh.
Like, she's like, "This is my mile time. Can you beat my mile time?" And I hadn't ran 2 miles.
What was her mile time?
I don't know. It was like, she ran it faster today. She's like 9:08 or something for 2 miles.
Yeah.
So mine,
she ran 2 miles at a 9:08 pace, or she ran 2 miles
9:08 per mile.
Okay,
so about 18 minutes.
I was like, she ran.
That's
but
fast.
She's
That's
cooking.
fast. No, she's got short legs. But like for me, like I hadn't ran 2 miles in I don't know how long. Yeah. I was like, this is stupid. She's like, I bet you can't beat my time. I was like, all right, I got to beat her time now. And then I ran it faster than she did, but like I hadn't ran 2 miles. I think I did 8:59, which is not fast by any means at all, but it was way faster than it was more distance than I ran and way faster than I ran in probably years.
Were you hurting afterwards?
No, I feel fine. I actually feel good.
Yeah.
I feel good. Like I feel more energy now. Like
that's cool.
I feel kind of flat the next day because I'm kind of wore out, but I like running. For me, it doesn't hurt my body, so I enjoy it.
I've been doing some hills. Yeah,
dude, I like, honestly, like, I want to get into trail, like riding trails on a bike.
Yeah.
Oh, dude,
They're fun.
It's fun, and it'll
tough.
burn you up.
Oh yeah.
So I was messaging Tony and just being like, hey man, what kind of bike should I get? Because I get in the weeds on it. And I'll start.
He's got like a friggin' like $7,000.
So I've been asking him like, how do I do this? Like, what do I need to get? Like, because I don't know. I'm weird like that. I'll get into something and I'll just like start researching the shit out of it and try to figure it out. But
all right, guys. So hope you enjoyed the podcast, and hope you guys enjoyed all those tangents. For all of you guys that are like, returning listeners, you guys know how we do it. Lots and lots of tangents. Also, I appreciate you guys because we can see the numbers of people downloading and stuff, and our numbers are staying up pretty well considering that a lot of you guys are not driving to work right now. So thank you guys for being here and staying with the podcast and listening to it and supporting it. Really do appreciate that. I don't like asking, but apparently I'm supposed to. I'm supposed to ask you guys to do stuff. Like, go to iTunes or wherever the hell you listen to this thing. And if they've got like a thing where you can rate us, give us a good rating. And if you don't think it's worth a good rating, send me a message and tell me, like, Chewy, this is why the podcast doesn't deserve a good rating. So this way I can get one from you. Let me earn it. But otherwise, if you enjoy the podcast and you'd like to support it, that's always helpful. Ratings are helpful. If you want to support it and get yourself some stuff, you can go to Charlotte's Web. get some CBD. You can use, again, the promo code is Chewjitsu on their website, and you can get yourself some high quality CBD products that are third party tested, so you know that what is on that bottle is listed is what you're getting in your body. Super, super important. I'm really fickle about that. Like, if I don't know what it is, even if there's something to not actually tell me what it really is, I don't want to put it in my body. It's the reason why, like, even at home, I'm funny about the foods that I eat, because it's like, if there's weird stuff that I don't necessarily want in my body, I don't buy it. I digress.
They just released actually some balms too.
I'm trying
pain
right
relieving
now.
balms. So.
I'm trying the balm right now. So before I got to try it first. So I'm trying the balm right now, and I'm going to see how I like it after because it was actually perfect timing. My shoulder's been bugging me, so it'll be a great chance to use it. So I'm going to see how the balm works. And if I like the balm, I will let you guys know. And if I don't like the balm, I'll have no problem telling you I don't like the balm, because I like a lot of their other stuff. But I'm going to actually do the test and sort of see what I think about it, and I'll get back to you guys. But they do have that balm up there as well. And, we got Matt at Epic Roll. If you're looking to get some jiu-jitsu gear, check them out. epicrollbjj.com. Use the promo code Jiu-Jitsu. And again, if you guys want to get some extras from the podcast, or you want to do some deeper learning, go to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. You can get all those podcast extras and the videos that we have. Or if you want to join me inside the vault, if you'd like to join me and see what I'm always cooking. Again, it's a monthly teaching. It's not expensive. It's a monthly sort of thing where I can get down into anything I want to get into, which is fun. Like last month, we did a module on meditation. I was like, you can't train. You want, like, people were asking me, Chewy, what are you doing? I'm like, this is one of the things that I'm doing. I'm meditating. Like, this is if you cannot control your headspace, how are you going to expect to be able to control anything else around you? If you cannot control the inside of you, what's going on in you, how are you going to be effectively able to control what's going on around you on the outside?
Listen to JT Torres' podcast. We asked him how much is it mental, how much is it physical. He has said the vast majority of what gets you to the highest level and gets peak performance is the mental aspect. So perfect time,
bro. One of the biggest things that made my performance in jiu-jitsu better was meditating, because you realize, like, you start to, like, become disconnected from the thoughts, in the sense you have distance. Like, I remember, like, realizing, like, I'm nervous. This is stupid. Like because again, you realize the silliness of it, right? Like, you're nervous, and like, what am I nervous for? If I win, great, it's gonna be great. If I lose, everybody's still gonna like me. Who cares? And then you realize, like, sometimes your own, like, your mental hangups. You'll, like, anyway. Meditation was incredibly helpful, and has been one of the reasons why my performance in competitions has gone up, because of the fact that I'm in better control of my headspace. So when I'm going through those days or those competitions, and, like, that self-doubt and all that stuff comes in, I can see it coming, and I can be like, no, I'm not doing this, dude. Pass on. So you can check that out at chewjitsu.net/vault. And guys, with that said, I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Appreciate you guys for being here. Talk to you guys next week.